Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News. It is, excuse me, it's very bad weather outside right now. Monday, July 27th, 3:35 p.m. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Supreme Court and temporary protective status, which is being, I don't know, misused, misaligned, mislaid, things of that nature. And so let's just talk about that and what is really going on. And is it a hypothesis of things that are occurring that we're not allowed to say, but may be coming true anyway? And we're going to discuss the continuing lawsuits over temporary protected status, or TPS as it is called. The Supreme Court has already ruled on many of the legal questions surrounding the administration's authority to terminate these protections. Yet rather than seeing the litigation come to an end, we are witnessing an entirely new series of lawsuits built upon different constitutional theories and different legal arguments. And it simply raises a question, it's pretty natural to think about. If the Supreme Court has largely spoken on the issue, why does the litigation continue? Well, TPS in general, the large amount of people that are in the country under that are from Syria and a lot of other countries that have proved problematic in their assimilation abilities here in the United States, let alone terrorism and things of that nature that they may be getting up to. And they weren't really supposed to come here in the first place because that's not how it works. And when the Supreme Court stood up for the law for one of the few times that it's done recently, the idea is just to sort of, it's okay, we'll work on some other angle. Okay. And it boggles the mind that people don't look at this as exactly what it could be. So let's be clear about a couple things. There are real people involved here. Many TPS have to do this, we get sued. Many TPS recipients fled war, political violence, or humanitarian disasters. Many have established lives here in the United States over many years, and so on and so forth. The legal questions we are discussing today are not about whether these individuals deserve sympathy. We are talking about how our constitutional system functions when the executive branch, Congress, advocacy groups, and the federal court system all collide over immigration policy. That distinction is important. The attorneys representing TPS recipients, which where are they getting all the money for these attorneys, right? Argue that they are simply exhausting every available legal avenue on behalf of their clients. That is certainly what lawyers are expected to do. If one legal argument fails, you examine another one. If one statute closes a door, perhaps the Constitution left a window open, right? No one should be surprised that skilled attorneys continue searching for viable legal theories. But I think you're going to see that there's another question worth asking. At what point does repeated litigation become something larger than representation of individual clients? When does it become a broader policy strategy? I am one of the people that believes that the majority of the immigration that has occurred in the last X amount of years, we can't mention anybody's name, was actually constituted under one of the tenets of what would be called fifth generation warfare, fourth or fifth generation warfare, which is to throw a bunch of people into a civilization that they are ill prepared to operate inside of, and they just become a suck to the system. It strains all the emergency and social and all other societal safety nets, which could go to the poor and disenfranchised of their own country. Instead, these people come in and they use it all up. That being said, we'll go back to where we were, right? So, what does this become as part of a broader policy strategy? Many of the organizations bringing these lawsuits are not simply law firms, they're advocacy organizations. And we know where they get their funding through Act Blue and ultimately USAID, and that one lady living in a trailer on the burnt remains of her own house who donated $150,000 that she never had, and nobody has gone and tracked down who did it and why didn't they arrest them. But that also is another question for the advocacy organizations. Their mission extends well beyond single immigration case. They are there to keep the bulk, the rump of these immigrants in the country. Some people have advanced the theory that maybe the keeping of these people in the country and the discovery of so many thousands of names on the voting rolls, once again, we can't say anything because of lawsuits and because of YouTube. So the courts simply become one of the principal arenas where these policy debates are taking place. So when we see constitutional arguments immediately replacing procedural arguments that were rejected by the Supreme Court, perhaps we should recognize that there is not merely one lawsuit, it is part of a much larger campaign. Another interesting feature of these cases is the role of the federal district courts. Several judges have elected to preserve the status quo while they consider these newly presented legal theories. Don't think that's really supposed to be done if the Supreme Court has ruled against. Supporters argue that it's exactly what the judges should do, right? If entirely new constitutional claims have been raised, they deserve careful judicial consideration. The things that they are citing that I have seen, there's nothing new about it. Usually when you see articles and they'll say, left-wing support organization comes up with novel new something to counter Supreme Court justices ruling on somebody v. somebody, right? If you remember when they talked about a lot of this stuff with the Trump administration, when they would go to court, they would be found not in favor, not that there's no guilty, you just didn't get your information through, based on they were using the wrong case or the wrong precedent. That's not what's going on here. When you see these opinion pieces, especially on this one, you should look at it. You're not going to see a 75-page long opinion piece like you had seen with Clarence Thomas, because they are just throwing stuff at the wall, hoping something sticks. Ultimately, people, and I'm just going to have to diverge from what we were originally going to say. Ultimately, people are going to realize that you are stalling for time trying to make it to the midterm elections. Because even though we have seen names struck off of rolls all over the country, theoretically, that does not mean that the voting system is going to be adhered to in a correct manner in all these areas like Michigan and California and Pennsylvania and all that shit. Just because you've done that doesn't mean that that's it. You know, a total renewal, renovation, overhauling, or whatever of the voting system in the United States is called for. Will we get that by the time of the midterm election? You don't know, right? Because so many of these states decided to fight. The Insurrection Act is designed for states that decide that they are not going to play nice with the federal government. I'm not one of those big insurrection. In fact, now I have to go shave because I don't want to be that guy with a beard, with a baseball hat from fucking Black Rifle talking about shit like this. But from a clear legal standpoint, this is nonsense. It's stalling tactics. And even if you did not directly collude with your sympathetic activist judges, they most assuredly knew these things were coming. So they're saying, you know, because here's the thing with the Supreme Court, they don't have to hear every case. People don't understand how the Supreme Court works. You don't have to hear every case. If they say they're not going to, here's what you do. So they're going to say, these activist judges, we're going to keep all these people in the country because of TPS and because there's going to be a new case, blah, blah, blah. What do they do when the Supreme Court says, we don't need to hear this, we're not going to do it? Does that mean they're going to continue to allow the illegals to stay in the country, probably getting benefits, maybe having a baby? Who knows? Until the next case that actually gets through to the Supreme Court? That's the big question. That's the big question because you'll forget about it for a minute. But Judge, whatever his name is, he hasn't forgot about it because he's got to strike a blow for the cause. Viva la causa, right? He's got to strike that blow for all the shit he didn't do back in high school and college. Red Army faction, SOB, right? So this is very important that this is happening. What is should upset people, which should upset some people, the fact that judges are just going to ignore, basically by saying we're going to hold off and wait and hear what happens next time, means you're ignoring what the Supreme Court has said because there is no guarantee that they're going to hear the next one, right? So that's the crazy of it all. The United States, can you say it was a failed coup? It was a failed coup to the most part. Part of it, obviously, I'm not going to get into all that. There's too many people out there that have too many whatever irons in the fire. And now I'm starting to just sound like gibberish. But the fact of the matter is, this should not go on. It is an affront to the United States judicial system. It's an affront to the Supreme Court and cheapens these district federal judges' positions even further because they are all for sale, right? And they say, well, we don't take money. We just support everybody's rights but American citizens. That makes you for sale. So if you have the opportunity, look at the cases that we're talking about. If you see anything in there that you want to know more about, let us know, DM or whatever the hell we're doing. Like and subscribe, and we'll get on to some real things later in the week. Been waiting to hear some information on a couple of interesting topics for you. And of course, we got State of the Strait tomorrow, where the world is just lighting up in the Strait of Hormuz. So until then, see you later on. Bye.